On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're taking a closer look at some of our player reviews at this point in the season. We're talking Nick Paul, Tanner Jeannot. Who won the Tanner Jeannot trade? Nick Paul continues to be an underrated player in this team, and we look towards tonight's matchup against the Nashville Predators. All that coming up on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for joining us here on this episode of Locked On Lightning. Just a reminder that today's episode of Locked On Lightning is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So we're talking about Tanner Jeannot, if the Lightning won that trade, because he's been playing phenomenal this year. And, you know, as the common theme is when we talk about with players on the Lightning or in hockey in general, stats don't tell the whole story. And sometimes they do, but it depends on the style of the player. We're talking about that. We're talking about Nick Paul, how he is one of the more vital pieces on this team, not named Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, Andrei Vasilevsky. Name a couple of players in there as well. And then we'll wrap things up with our preview of tonight's game against the Nashville Predators. But before we do that, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. That is Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, wherever they got podcasts. We are there. Also, you can subscribe to our channel on YouTube as well. Subscribe to the channel, drop a comment below this video, as well as hit us with that thumbs up button. Let us know how we're doing. Drop a question, drop a comment just about how you feel about certain things that I say on today's show. Would love to hear all the back and forth that comes from all of you. So we're looking at Tanner Jeannot, and there was a lot of talk, obviously, since last season about the Tanner Jeannot trade at the deadline. That was a trade that I thought what you're getting back is good, but obviously what the Lightning had to give up was a little excessive, and I mean that with a little bit of sarcasm. It was a very lopsided trade in the moment, and I think that it will be a trade that, you know, when we look back on it, unless all those pieces that Nashville got don't amount to anything, really, this is a trade that really the Lightning might look back on with favoritism, and we're kind of seeing the full effects of that trade right now. I spoke about it coming into this season too when we were talking about Tanner Jeannot, how really it was going to be interesting to see how he was going to be able to respond to that in his first full season. Because listen, he may not say it, online, he may not say it in interviews or whatever the case may be, but I'm sure to a certain degree he felt the pressure from that trade to a certain extent, whether it was last year or even coming into his first full season with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think that he has handled it pretty well. I think that we can't really judge him for how he played coming in at the deadline. Not everyone could come in at the deadline, Nick Paul, who we will talk about later, and just light the world on fire. I think Tanner Jeannot is also a different player, and he plays the game a different way. Because when you look at how he plays within this Lightning offense and just on this team in general, his responsibility isn't primarily to come in and score goals or really put up points on a nightly basis. It's really kind of just go out there and disrupt the flow of the opposing team in whichever way he could possibly do. And I think he's done a really good job this year of doing that, because when you look at how he's played through 27 games, really the thing that sticks out, other than the fact that, yes, he does have 6 goals, that's already more than what he's had. Actually, that's already matched what he had last year, but it's more so the little things that he has done for this Tampa Bay Lightning team, and we talk about that a lot on this show, how, yeah, you have your stars, you have your Hedmans, your Kucherov, Point, Hagel, those guys, um, Stamkos even. Those guys are gonna come in, they're gonna put up points, they're gonna score goals, and that's great. But when you look at the depth behind those guys on the lower lines, even the Anthony Cirellis, who we spoke about last night, you know, it's not the end of the world if they don't score a ton of points. If, example, if Tanner Jeannot doesn't score 50 points this year, it's not gonna be something that necessarily hurts the Lightning. I mean, yeah, it's for those who are still kind of worried about the trade haul that was given up for him last year. Yeah, I mean, he's got really big expectations for Phil to really to look at the Lightning and say they won that trade. But really his main responsibility, like I said, is to obstruct the other team, to do anything that is asked of him in the current situation. We saw it last night. He was playing physical. He was really leading the charge along the boards, really stalling the Penguins in anything they did. He's also done a very good job of being the guy in terms of sort of playing the goon part this year for the Lightning. He's been in quite a number of fights. I mean, that's not really a big deal, but it is, in a way, nice to see a guy like that who could do a little bit of everything and kind of carry the team in certain situations emotionally. And that's something that the Lightning have kind of missed over the last couple of years since the exit, I think, of Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow. I think that those guys kind of played a similar game than what from compared to what we saw with Tanner Jeannot. Now, Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow also were also better in certain situations than Tanner Jeannot. I thought that Goodrow had his decent abilities in the faceoff circle. That's not Jeannot's game. Um, Coleman, obviously, we all know is a point getter, so there's that as well. Where Jeannot, we're not really expecting him to put up that many points, but you don't really need that from him when you got him on the third line. Really, like I said, he is there to kind of wear down the opposing team into submission and then get the points when they come to him. He also doesn't have to go get the points because at the same time, he's got Nick Paul on his line, who is a phenomenal player who's been playing very well, who really has setting the tone for this third line Lightning line alongside Mikey Esamont, who I still think that there is a lot left to be written about Esamont because he has shown us a lot, not to get too off track here, but what we've seen from Esamont really since last year and then this year as well is that he does possess the skill in flashes to be a point getter, to be a guy who could potentially put up 20, 30 points a year on the third line. And I think, that range, 20 to 30 points on the third line, is a very good number for this Lightning team because I think we could all agree John Cooper doesn't really look at Tanner Jeannot as a guy who is going to come in, score 20 to 30 points. I mean, if you get 20 points out of Jeannot, that's phenomenal. I mean, he's overplaying his value. I think we could agree that. But to kind of put it in perspective, Jeannot's career high for points was 41 in his second year, really his first full year in the NHL, in which he finished 7th in the Calder. And I think that really that was kind of just a year where the league didn't know much about him. They didn't know opposing teams didn't know how to handle Jeannot. And now what you see is kind of what you get with him. I feel like he was kind of he put himself on this pedestal almost last year when he came in with Lightning fans see 24 goals, they see 41 points, and they think like, wow, we got this guy for a steal. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't have much of a problem with it as long as the players above him really kind of set the tone for the rest of the team. And I think that's what is so good about Tanner Jeannot is that his game, to a certain degree, is so fluid, because when you look at how the rest of the team is playing, and it's the way he's playing now and contributing and being able to do many things in many different situations, such as lay up a lot of hits, take a lot of blocks. I don't expect him to be a big face-off guy, but he had 4 hits last night against Pittsburgh, 1 block. Um, he's not going to put up a lot of shots on goal, but he's going to be a guy, like I said, who's going to go out there. He's going to grind out the opposing team, and at time to time get points where it is needed. And I think, a lot of that also has to do with players on this line, like Nick Paul, who we will get to in just a bit. So let me know in the comments below what you think about Tanner Jeannot. I think he's having a very good season. He's one of those players where, like I said, we can't really judge him on his numbers. But if you want to judge him solely on his numbers this season, I think he's been playing very well. 6 goals, 10 points. His plus minus is ugly, but a lot of players on the Lightning, their plus minuses have been not so good, have been pretty much all in the negatives for the most part to start the season. Now that Vazzy's back, we're probably going to see those numbers kind of get back to the positives. So stay tuned for that. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think about Tanner Jeannot's season. Could he potentially play himself onto the second line or possibly make the case? That's yet to be seen. I'm not entirely sure, but it's not something I wouldn't entirely rule out with Tanner Jeannot. So we'll talk about Nick Paul coming up in just a little bit, what his value means to the Tampa Bay Lightning this year, and how he's really been doing a phenomenal job of being that guy. We'll talk about that. What does that mean when we say he is that guy? We talk about that in just a bit. But first, I want to talk about one of our sponsors today, and that is our friends over at Jase Medical. Now, I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we just talk a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. That is scary for anybody who gets affected by flu. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than, my girlfriend or, one of my nephews getting sick while a supply chain issue kept them from life-saving medication. They need it. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. So visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. So go to jasemedical.com and use the code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. So as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. You could also follow us on our social media pages at @L_Lightning on Twitter, as well as _Lightning on Instagram. And you can follow me on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. Love hearing from all of you. Love the back and forth conversation that we always have here on Locked On Lightning. And so we just got done talking about Tanner Jeannot. So I think that he's played the best you could possibly ask of him since given all the players around him. He's not going to be a 30-goal scorer. If he ends up being that, that's great, but I just don't see it in him, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, some people might think it's a bad thing, but given everything that was given up for him at the trade, whatever, that I'm over it. Everybody else should be at this point as well. But we're moving forward. We're looking at Nick Paul. He has just been playing well. He's been playing phenomenal. And he's another player like Tanner Jeannot. When you look at Nick Paul's stats, it doesn't jump out from the page from you about what kind of season he's having. I mean, yes, 27 games played, 8 goals, 3 assists. That comes out to 11 points if you're following along and doing your math. And he's averaging about 17 minutes of ice time per night. And the thing about Nick Paul that has really impressed me is he does score in bunches here and there. He will get his his points and clusters. But he's another player, just like Nick Paul, who, I mean, just like Tanner Jeannot. They both play on the same line, which is a great. I would say that they feed off each other's games. But the thing that really impresses me about him, and the thing that I feel like the Lightning have been missing over really since those Cup Finals teams, have been a guy that could get down into the dirty areas, could be a Swiss Army knife, but also be consistent in the faceoff circle. And that's what you have in Nick Paul. Nick Paul could play physical. He could get down into the dirty areas of the corners. He will stand there in front of the opposing netminder and just take rebounds and just deflections off and not care. I mean, he's going to get beaten up. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter with him. But he is a player that really, like we've spoken about with this Lightning team over the last couple of years, is where they've really struggled has been the faceoff circle. And I think having a player like that, I think when we look back on Nick Paul throughout the duration of his 8-year extension, is that he will have won many games indirectly because of his performance in the faceoff circle. Last night, just to kind of put it into context, he won 6. Okay. 6 of 8. That comes out to 75% if your math is right. And he's been doing a good job over the last 5. I mean, you look at the Dallas games, he didn't do a good job, in that win. I mean, he did all right when you're comparing it to his performance last night. He was 5 of 10, which is okay. He faltered a little bit in the blowout loss, 5 of 11, but this guy is consistent in the faceoff circle. Most nights you'll see him at 50, 60, and even last night, 75%. And that's what the Lightning need, whether it be in their own zone, whether it be in the opposing team zone, especially down late in games, because that will definitely come into a lot of, we'll definitely have our fair share going forward of the Lightning still being down in certain games. But it's very important to this team because, you do have guys that could win faceoffs. You have your Stamkoses, you have your Sorellis. But Nick Paul is definitely one of those guys where he is an essential when it comes to this Lightning team. And on top of that, of his faceoff ability, his ability to make the players better around him. We've seen that firsthand with Mikey Eyssimont, with Tanner Jeannot. They're both having very good years, and that is because of the guy down the middle in Nick Paul. And you can't help but wonder with this guy through 27 games, like I said, 8 goals, 11 points. What is the ceiling for him? And without getting too out of the realm of possibility, if I had to guess, I would probably say his mark is kind of what we saw last year. This year, with the pace he's on, it might be a little higher. And last year, he put up 17 goals and 32 points. That matches a career high from him from back in 21-22. But I think that he will be a guy for the rest of his career, which is essential for a second line guy who could be a Swiss Army knife to kind of be around the 40-point mark, to be around 20 goals. I don't think he's going to get 20 goals every year. I think he will get 20 goals at some point. I think he's that smart of a player. I think he's very nifty down low, and he'll get his fair share of garbage goals down there, which a goal is a goal. It doesn't matter where it's scored from. But I think at the end of the day, I think Nick Paul's ceiling, realistic ceiling, is definitely around probably 16, 17, maybe 35 to 40 points. But that's hoping that he is not falling in love with scoring goals and scoring points, and being able to keep doing the things in his game that allow this Lightning team to continue to win games. Because I think that when you look at the last 2 games, even in the game where, yes, his face-off percentage took a little bit of a hit against Dallas in that shutout loss, the guy was a pest in front of the net. And I just got done talking about how well he played last night as well. I think at the end of the day, I think that when you look at the depth, when you're kind of looking towards who's going to be the table setter for the depth players on this Lightning team, it's going to be Nick Paul. He's going to be, we spent a lot of time on this show talking about how Cooch is the the spoon that stirs the pot, or whatever analogy you want to use. He's the guy that really gets things started. But Nick Paul is just as important to this team getting things going as Kucherov is to the top half of the team. It seems like these two guys kind of have that. You have Kuch kind of setting the table for the first and second lines, and then you got Paul setting the table for the third and fourth. And I think that's a great way to look at this team, and even look at Tanner Jeannot as well as part of that combination down low in the lines, is that those guys are in charge of getting things started for the lower half of the Lightning forward lines 3 and 4. So let me know in the comments below what you think. I think he's off to a stellar season. As for potentially being a Selke Trophy finalist, he's got a long ways to go, but I think that he is one of the better centers in this division. I firmly believe him and Cirelli and Point. I don't know if you want to consider him a pure center, but Cirelli and Paul definitely, I think, are up there as one of the best center guys in at least the Atlantic Division. So we'll continue to monitor their play throughout the course of the year, as the Lightning look like they're taking a turn for the better here at the end of 2023. So we'll wrap things up with a preview of tonight's game against the Nashville Predators in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about our sponsors, our last sponsors of the day, and that is our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Now, the weather's getting colder. The NFL is heating up. The playoffs are just around the corner, and it's your time to get in on the action with our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in a bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off your NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. So wrapping things up on the show today, as always, I want to humbly thank you for joining us and making us your first listen of the day here on Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And we're taking a look, the Lightning, as much as we like to bask in the afterglow of what is a Lightning win, we got to pick it up right away and get back to it, get back to business, because the Lightning are right back at it tonight in Nashville against the pesky Nashville Predators. And the Lightning are closing out their season series against the Nashville Predators after previously winning their October 10th matchup against these guys 5-3 at home. And I say this about the Predators all the time, and I say this about kind of teams that are in the wheelhouse of teams that are not overly impressive in terms of, we're not expecting them to go out and win the West or even their division, but they're going to be a team that is going to take it to you on any given night. And that's what I fully expect from this Predators team. They're looking at a Lightning team who's starting to get hot, and they're definitely going to try and force the issue and try and get gritty early on. And that's why it's so important in these kind of games where the Lightning are facing teams that they're not going to see for the rest of the season. These teams kind of, I'm not gonna accuse them of playing dirty, but they're going to take certain liberties that maybe a team that you have to play a couple more times may not, because let's say if a player does something a little bit questionable or goes a little bit overboard with physicality, for example, in a matchup with Boston or a division rival or an Eastern Conference team that you still have you still have games against, guess what? You're going to have to pay for it in your next matchup. Where Nashville, the only other time after tonight that the Lightning could potentially face the Predators is if they meet each other in the Stanley Cup final, which don't think that's going to happen. There's a very minute possibility of that happening, but the Lightning are going to have to sit back and just allow the Predators to kind of be a little overly aggressive so the Lightning can draw penalties and allow that high-powered, one of the best power plays in the NHL to go out there and do what they do best, and that's score. I didn't even realize after last night's game that like the Lightning, because we all know at this point in time that the Lightning power play is just very good and high-powered, and really the issue with this Lightning team all year was even strength goals. But I didn't realize it was so excessive to a point to where the Lightning were all the way now ranked second in the NHL with a 31.9% power play success, which is insane when you really think about it. And on the other hand of that, they rank top 10, pretty much ninth in the NHL with an 83.8 PK. And that just shows you just how valuable the Lightning special teams are and how imperative it is, especially in a game like this where the Lightning are very well probably going to face UC Saros tonight, who, in my opinion, is top 3 in the league. The Lightning will get their chances tonight. I mean, I would be shocked if, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but the Lightning will get their chances on the special teams tonight. Like I said, I expect a very physical game from both teams tonight. And that's where guys like Tanner Jeannot and Nick Paul, who we just got done talking about, will come into play. And the Lightning power play will have to step up. If they are on the power play 6 times tonight, I would expect maybe 2 to 3 power play goals tonight. But that doesn't mean that the Lightning could just kind of fall asleep on even strength. That's where they got to get their chances too and take advantage of those opportunities, especially down low, because Saros, I expect that the Lightning are going to go at him early. They're going to go at him heavy, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities for rebounds and deflections in front of Saros, and that's where the Lightning need to strike. They need to get there. They need to be aggressive, and they can't allow a team like the Predators, who are barely a 500 team, to be able to get things going. Because like I said, these teams, it seems like it's the Lightning. Whenever a team that's a little bit lower on the food chain runs into the Tampa Bay Lightning, they need to they kind of take up their game a notch. And having said that, also Nashville's coming in on a very hot 10-game streak right now. They're 8-2 in their last 10, winners of their last 2, and the Lightning need to shut it down real quick early on. And really what it comes down to, the key for tonight's game, is to replicate last night. Really just choke the life out of the Predators early on. Don't allow them to get any shots, any clean shots, any clean looks. I'm not expecting or saying that the Lightning should try and limit the shots on goal like we saw last night against the Penguins, where the Penguins only had 6 shots up until like midway through the second. I'd be shocked if that's actually the situation that we see tonight, but you definitely don't want to give them a clean look. And I would expect that Johansson's going to play tonight. And so, Johansson, as we know, could be a little bit shaky. And that's why it's that imperative that the Lightning defense shows up and really takes the reins of this hockey game early on and sets the tone. So I'm expecting a 4-2 win, maybe even 3-2. I think it's going to be a tight one tonight, especially on the road, especially against a team who, as of late, has been playing very well. But the Lightning have been playing very well lately, too, in their last 2 wins. So I would expect both these teams, like I said, play physical, play a tight hockey game. But the Lightning needs to just go out there and develop their game as it goes on, as the game progresses. So we'll be back tomorrow to recap this game. So make sure to subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form, and hit that notification button if you're listening or watching on an app. So as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.